Hey everyone, it's Casey here, and today we have more info to help you grow the best garden. Today's topic is sprinkler timers, and we're going to talk about the basics of your sprinkler system, the most popular types of timers out there, and then I'll actually help you figure out how to use your timer, making it very easy to understand. So if you have sprinklers with a timer, and you want to know how to use it, or you want to build up your landscaping skills, this video may be for you. These systems save huge amounts of time, and they don't get a whole lot of credit, and I've always been fascinated by how they work. Let's dive into the fundamentals of your system. This stuff gets me excited. Alright, every sprinkler system's different, but they all share some commonalities. They all start from a point on your main water line. Then they'll splinter off into their own safer controlled line, and the water is pressurized, so it just pushes out of any opening it can get. There's always a main shutoff line to the house, and hopefully you have a separate sprinkler line with a shutoff. Makes it easier to work on. And you might have a couple sprinkler valves also, or you might have a bunch of them. But anyways, when they open up, the sprinklers are going to be running in specific areas of your yard called stations or zones. Now, the timer takes your inputs for each zone, and then it kind of talks to the valves and it tells them to open up specific time and date that you set in the future. And that's how it talks to them. It uses an electrical current to talk to your valves, and that's what those little wires are coming out on your valves for. They have to be connected to the timer for this all to work. So that's really it. There's no wizardry to it. It's pretty straightforward when you think about it like that. These timers and the valves, they basically do one thing. They open and they close at specific times. So when you think about it that way, they're not quite as intimidating. And if you do turn on your sprinklers and they come on and it's a complete disaster, you might want to hit the subscribe button, because we're definitely going to be talking about more projects like that in the future. But back to timers. What timer do you have, and is it the timer you should have? The only way I might get tempted away from my existing timer is if I wanted to invest in a wireless one, a newer model. That's also the main choice that needs to be made, because most makes and models are pretty good these days. So it's more about, would you prefer to have an inexpensive, tried and true timer, but to operate it, you have to go and fiddle with it out in the corner of the yard or the garage? Or would you rather have a timer that you can fiddle around on your couch or in your hotel room through wireless internet on your smartphone? Now, it's worth mentioning that you need to get a timer that is appropriate for the amount of zones you want to run on it. Also, there are other types of timers that operate without a plug-in cable. These will operate on a battery, or they're solar-powered ones. So pretty interesting, and they're great for areas in the yard where it's impossible to get a plug to. The battery ones, I would definitely forget to replace the batteries. That'd be dangerous for me. But I'm really intrigued and interested in the solar-powered ones. I'm curious. I need to write that down and take a look at those again, because it sounds like pretty good technology. You probably have a pretty good idea of which timer would work better for your situation. So I'll kind of get into my preferences. I guess I have one in the backyard. It's one of the old school timers. It's not a wireless, smartphone activated one. It's pretty easy for me to use. Most people, though, those older school timers, they're a little difficult to use. Most people have a hard time with them. The reason I think that is because the interface on those timers is not very friendly. On the smartphone timers, you really have an easier interface, and it's awesome because it helps with my memory too. You can, on the old school timers, you just have zones 1, 2, 3. You don't have any idea what that goes to. but on your app, you can take a picture of the area that that particular zone waters. You can give it a name, and it just saves it in there. So every time you're working on that station, you know exactly what you're doing. It's a little easier as far as the interface. I have a client that invested in a B-Hyve timer, and I loved it. I really liked it. And the reason is I was able to walk around the yard with my phone and turn on and off the sprinklers as I was walking around. It saved me a ton of time. That's a huge deal. I find they're easier to set up and make the adjustments on them too. And all my kind of like jitters from using the old school timers, like I'm thinking I might have made a mistake, like even I get those jitters. It seems to kind of go away when you're just on your phone, and you can kind of hit with confidence, save, and then done. A lot of gardeners, they don't really, they might not have that expertise on the phone apps. So you know, if you might need help in the future, like setting it up, that could be difficult for them. So you definitely want to talk to your gardener and make sure he's on board with it if he's still a part of it. If you're gonna think about getting a smart timer. But if you do want to take the reins yourself, keep watching the last part of the video, and I'm gonna help you get started on that. First, let's get some confidence going. Know this, all those fancy settings on the timer come down to two things: frequency, or how often, or like what days it goes on, that's your frequency, and duration, how long does it run for. This frequency and duration concept then applies to each station, and that's gonna go, each station is gonna go into your program. So you wanna start with program A, and don't worry about messing it up. You can always set it for a time where you know you're gonna be home and run it at that time, and you can make sure it actually works. You can always check, so it's no big deal. Every timer is going to have an instruction manual that comes with it, or you can get it online, and sometimes they even have support that you can call. This isn't about how to input data. We want to talk about the important things. Some timers are even really quirky, even if you have the manual. So, have someone show you what is wrong, or, leave a message in the chat here if you're still having trouble, and get over that little hump. It's just a little speed bump. It's usually some sort of confusion on, like I said, the interface. So, assuming you have those inputs under control, probably the biggest mistake I see with old school timers is, and this sounds really silly, but I freak out about it myself sometimes, leaving it in the off position when you're done with it. You have to remember to turn that dial or that switch back to the auto or run, or else the sprinklers ain't gonna turn on. That's also how you can turn it off for extended periods of time. You also need to make sure you have the correct date and time set on the old school timers. On the new timers, it's gonna do that automatically on your phone. And then there's a start time feature. And this is gonna sound really obvious. It's the start time. But you need to be careful because you can set multiple start times for the same day. And that's like what you'd use if you were watering a lawn with new seeds or something like that, where it needs to kind of get sprinkled multiple times a day. Just be careful, because I've seen people set up duplicate settings that way. And that's kind of the same thing that goes for different programs. And I'm going to explain those just a little bit right now, because they can be a little tricky. Program A, B, C, they allow you to set different times on your timer like they were completely different timers. So they run independent of each other, and they run consecutively based on whatever settings are inside of them. For example, if you have a lawn and you need to water it, say 4 times a week, that goes on program A. But your planter beds don't need 4 times a week, so you're gonna wanna set those on their own individual program B. That way, they're completely separated. What you do have to be a little careful with is I've seen people have the same station in multiple programs within their timer, and since each program is going to run whatever is in it and set up in it, you'll get duplicate watering situation. So if you don't want, your lawn to water in program B, you need to leave it blank in program B for that station. Now, myself in a new yard, I usually set it up for 10 minutes, 3 times a week on average, and kind of adjust it from there. Remember also that new plants are going to need water more frequently, so you got to kind of babysit those newbies. You should also check your sprinklers for floods before you set it up for an extended period of time, because it's just going to keep running and flooding. It's especially important if you have a drip irrigation system, because those typically run for longer than your regular sprinklers. And there's also a budget feature on most timers, and what that's going to do is it's going to let you switch from summer to winter back to summer without having to change many settings, and make it a little easier to switch back and forth. What the budget is going to do is it's going to take your existing settings, and then it's going to reduce the amount of time each zone works based on the percentage of your budget. So if you set it to like 60% budget, it's gonna water for 40% less time. So 10 minutes would go to 6 minutes in that situation. And then that just makes it easier to go back to summer without having to change every single setting. It just does a blanket thing for that particular program. What I do is I keep a log in my notes on my iPhone, and that's gonna have the station number, the name of the area, and when I make changes. That way it's super easy to keep up with what I've done as the seasons change. And because in Southern California, we'll need to change our timers in October or November, kind of like getting ready for winter. And then we'll have to change them again in February or March-ish when like spring is opening up. And then the third time we usually change them is in like June, when summer starts to peak. I'm sure it's going to be different for different regions. We're in a Mediterranean area here, and we have really hot, dry summers and cold, humid winters, occasional rain and occasional, dry windstorm. So in these extreme situations, micromanagement can be really important. Like if it dumps rain like it did here the other day, you can just hit the rain delay button, which is a nice feature, because oftentimes if you just turn it off, like my friend who forgot to turn it back on after it rained, and he didn't have water going for 2 months before he realized what was going on. His wife was like, "Oh my gosh, the plants look bad, they're drying out." Well, they didn't hit the rain delay button, they just turned it off. So that's what's nice about the rain delay. It will automatically kick back on after a set amount of time. And there's also some like new technology coming out on the newer timers. You can hook up a rain sensor, which actually measures water in your yard, and that will hook up to your timer and kind of do like a rain delay feature itself. And there's also new smart timers that hook up to like cloud internet, and they're gonna pull weather reports for your local area and water based on your weather reports. Pretty next level stuff right there. So in conclusion, timers are our friends. They're there to make our lives easier. They're huge time savers, and they're often taken for granted. The regular models are reliable, and most gardeners are familiar with these, but I would prefer to get an internet-based one for my yard, because the additional settings, the additional features, being able to walk around with it on the fly, pretty awesome. But remember, all these settings and all that stuff, it just comes down to 2 things: the frequency, the duration, how often and for how long. That's it. So don't get overwhelmed by it. The rest is just creating your ideal schedule, figuring out what that is. Maybe get some help with that if you're just not sure, and putting in that data. That's all it really is. So I hope this helped, and if it did, please hit the thumbs up. And then if you'd like to get more of these insights, please hit the subscribe button, as I'll be creating more and more of these videos in the coming months. Thank you.